Hey guys, I hope y'all are having a wonderful day today. I am really excited because we're going to be doing a foundation battle today. I haven't done one of these on my channel in a while and I'm really excited about this one. So in my last video, I tested out the new Charlotte Tilbury Beautiful Skin Foundation and I really like this. I love the way that it wore on my skin and this is one that I would highly recommend. However, this one does cost $44, which is a typical price point for Charlotte Tilbury, but I think I have another foundation that's only $6 and it might be one that wears very similar to this one. So I do already have both of the foundations on my face. I'm going to show you what that other one is in just a second. And so far I think that they look quite similar, but we're at the start of the wear test that we're going to be doing today. So we're going to be testing this one up against the $6 Wet n Wild Tinted Hydrator. So I do already have both of these on my face, so let me know if you can tell which side is which, because I think they look quite similar. So let me know. So before we get into this battle, if you're here for the first time, hello and welcome. Thank you so much for stopping by. On this channel, we do makeup videos that cater to the 40 and over crowd, but makeup lovers of all ages are welcome. So if you are new here, please subscribe. I would love to have you join and I would really appreciate your support. Okay, y'all, let's get into this battle. Okay, so we're going to start off with some information about both of the foundations, just like a general overview of them. Then we'll apply them side by side. We'll see what we're thinking about how they look initially. And then of course, we're going to do a wear test and we're going to see which one we think wore better or do they pretty much wear the same. So let's start off with some information on the Charlotte Tilbury foundation. This one costs $44 and it claims to be a 16-hour wear. So we're not going to be testing them out for that long, but it is supposed to be a long wearing foundation. It is a medium buildable coverage with a natural finish and it should hydrate, smooth, and blur your pores and also brighten your skin. Some of the highlighted ingredients in here are hyaluronic acid, rose complex, and Bix Active. So in case you're not familiar with Bix Active, because I had never heard of that until I did the review on this foundation, that is meant to reduce shine and blur the look of your pores. So that's the main information on that foundation. And now let's move on to the Wet n Wild Tinted Hydrator. So this one is a sheer to medium buildable coverage with a semi matte finish. Now we'll talk about the finish a little bit later on because I'm not sure if I agree with that, but it does say it's supposed to be a semi matte finish. It's supposed to give you a naturally flawless and nourished glow. And some of the highlighted ingredients in this one are hyaluronic acid and vegan squalene. Okay, so let's get right into the application, and I feel like I want to start off with the Charlotte Tilbury foundation, and let's do it on this side of the face. So I'm going to be applying both of these with similar sponges. These are kind of small, like I wish I had. These are two of the SonyaNicole sponges, and I wish I had the regular size ones, but I only have one of those. So I just figured I'd use these just because they're similar. I wanted to use two of the same types of application tools for both of the foundations. When I tested this out the first time, I did apply this one with a brush, and I was saying that I wish I had used a sponge instead because this one does have kind of like a thicker consistency to it. So I'm starting off with one full pump of this foundation, and then I'm going to do the equivalent of that on the Wet n Wild side, and then we'll go back and build both sides up. So I'm just going to start by blending this out. And yes, this definitely blends out better with a sponge compared to a brush, in my opinion. So let me know what y'all think about this color. This is 11 Cool on its own. So if you saw my review video on this foundation, I mixed 11 Cool and 13 Warm, and 13 Warm was pulling a little bit yellow. So on that video, I did do a pinned comment to let y'all know, especially for those of you who might use me as a shade reference. 13 Warm in this foundation on Sephora's website, it said that 13 Warm has a warm bronze undertone, which is why I got it. But then on Charlotte Tilbury's website, 13 Warm is described as a warm yellow undertone, which is why it was pulling yellow. So just keep that in mind if you're thinking about, if you're looking at 13 Warm. Or I guess for any of them, like if you're planning on getting it at Sephora, maybe also go to the Charlotte Tilbury website to see what they say the undertone is. Okay, so this is about 1 pump of the Charlotte Tilbury foundation. I forgot to, there we go, I forgot to zoom y'all in. So that's 1 pump of the Charlotte Tilbury foundation. So let's do the Wet n Wild side so we can compare the first layer. This one is the shade Medium Deep. So this foundation, it dispenses a little bit differently than Charlotte Tilbury because the Charlotte one has a pump on it, but I think this is like the same amount of product. So I'm going in with my other sponge. And so far, I feel like they're blending out pretty much the same. No like glaring differences so far. I do feel like maybe the Wet n Wild one is blending out a little faster maybe. Like it's blending out maybe just a little easier. And I did say in my review video for Charlotte Tilbury, I was using a brush, but I did say that the foundation felt like a little thick as I was blending it out. So with this one, I do think it is blending out a little faster with a sponge. Okay, so let us take a look and see what we think. So again, this is the Charlotte Tilbury side, and this is the Wet n Wild side. Do y'all have a preference so far? I am going to build it up a little bit, but so far, is there one that you all like better than the other? Or do you notice any differences? I really don't notice too much of a difference. I think that they look pretty similar to one another aside from the shade. I don't know if y'all can tell on camera, but this shade looks a little bit more maybe like a neutral type of undertone on me, whereas this one I do think is a pretty good shade match. But other than that, like the way that they're wearing on my skin, the way that they're laying, I think that they're pretty similar. Now, when I tried the Wet n Wild foundation, I don't remember being as excited about it as I was with the Charlotte Tilbury one, because this one just looked like so pretty to me. But now that I'm looking at them side by side, they both look equally pretty. So let me know what y'all think so far. I'm gonna build up both of the sides. So I'm gonna go in with, let's do like a half pump more of the Charlotte Tilbury foundation. And I like to always concentrate my second layer on my cheeks because I always want the most coverage right there. And then I'll go in and like put the residual product everywhere else. Yeah, the Wet n Wild foundation, it definitely blends out faster than this one. I mean, this one isn't hard to blend out at all, but I'm just saying like the Wet n Wild one does blend just a little bit easier than this one. Okay, so this is about a pump and a half of Charlotte Tilbury, and let's go in with a little bit more of Wet n Wild. Can you guys see how on the Wet n Wild side, the foundation, I feel like the foundation is doing a lot of the work for me in terms of like blending out. Like it's just, I don't know, it's just a lot easier to spread this one out, I think. I'm just remembering that I meant to do an intro before I started applying the foundation, and I was going to do another intro after my makeup was done because I can't decide right now like which one would be better. And of course I forgot to do an intro, so now I guess I don't have any choice. Oh well. Okay, so we have about a pump and a half of both of the foundations on each side of my face. So again, this is the Charlotte Tilbury side and this is the Wet n Wild side. I'm gonna let them both sit for about a minute or two and then I'll come back so we can compare like how they have set on the face. So far, both of them are still pretty wet and I think you guys can tell that, but so far I do think that they look pretty similar to each other in terms of how they're wearing on my face. But I'm gonna come back in about a minute or two after they have completely set. Alright, it's been about a minute and I've been looking in the mirror the whole time, and I don't know, as much as I really liked that Charlotte Tilbury foundation the first time that I tried it, I feel like I might be liking this Wet n Wild foundation a little bit better. So I did say earlier that we were going to talk a little bit about the Wet n Wild one, claiming to have a semi-matte finish. I do think that it looks less glowy than the Charlotte Tilbury side, but I don't know if I would consider this a semi-matte finish. I think it looks like a semi-matte up against Charlotte Tilbury because Charlotte Tilbury is giving me a little bit more of a glow, but I think that this one does have more of a natural finish to it. I wouldn't call it semi-matte, I would just call it like natural, but it's not quite as glowy as the Charlotte Tilbury side. Like Charlotte Tilbury, I just feel like you can instantly see like more glow over here, whereas this one doesn't look quite as dewy, I guess, but they both have like a natural looking glow, just a little bit more of like a dew or maybe a little bit more of like a radiance on the side. I don't know, like now I don't know which one I like better, but I think I'm leaning toward this Wet n Wild one, but maybe when we see the completed makeup look, that will give us a bit more perspective too. So let's go ahead and finish up the rest of the face, and I'm going to quickly go through this. I know that some of you like to see the whole routine, but because we're just like really focusing on these side-by-side foundations, I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. So I am starting off with my Aucoin Sensual Skin Enhancer, and I use this as a color corrector underneath my brightening concealer. And then for my brightening concealer, I'm using my Anastasia one. I'm pretty sure this is the concealer that I used in the video when I tested out the Charlotte Tilbury one, because I have been using this pretty consistently just to kind of like finish it off. So I'm pretty sure this is the same one that I used. So I'm taking note of how my under eye concealer is blending, like kind of like right up in here on top of the foundation, because one thing that stood out to me when I tested out the Charlotte Tilbury one was how well it wore like right on the side of my nose. Like it made my pores look very blurred. So I'm taking note of that, and the Charlotte Tilbury one does look really good to me, but so does the Wet n Wild one. Like I do feel like they are looking like really similar to each other. I'm setting my concealer, my under eye, with my Kosas powder. This one is the shade Pillowy. And I'm gonna set the rest of my face with my Sephora Microsmooth powder. This one is in the shade Tan. So when I tested out the Charlotte Tilbury powder, I keep forgetting that this lid is broken. So as soon as I get this open, I will set my face. Okay, my lid comes off completely. So when I tested out the Charlotte Tilbury foundation, I did set it with the Charlotte Tilbury powder, but I feel like just to be fair, I need to not go in with that powder for today because I don't know if that'll like help sway my decision because I'm using a Charlotte Tilbury powder. Does that make sense? So I'm going in with Sephora Microsmooth. And also I just haven't used this foundation in a while, or this powder rather. I've been using the Kosas powder lately to set my entire face. So I figured I would use this one for today. I'm also like really pushing the powder into my face today because another thing that I noticed in the Charlotte Tilbury video is that I did use this brush, but I was saying that I wish I had used a more dense brush to help me push the powder into the face And I did that when I refreshed the makeup, but then it gave me more of like a matte finish. So what I'm doing is I am using the brush that I would normally use, which is a loose powder brush, but I am like further like pushing the powder into the face just to like really help set it, and perhaps that will help the foundation wear a little bit longer. The Charlotte Tilbury one wore for about 6.5 hours before I started getting shiny. Now for blush and bronzer, I'm going to use products that I haven't used in a while because I want to use ones that are a bit more maybe light and natural looking on the face so that we can really stay focused on the foundation. So for blush, I'm using one of the Natasha Denona blushes. I don't think that these shades have colors, but this is one of the blush duos. This one is, it just says number 11, I believe. So I'm going to be using this shade over here for blush. And I'm taking the same brush that I use to set my foundation. I'm just using the other side of it. So this one gives me like a really nice like flush of color on the cheeks, which is what I'm going for today. And then for my bronzer, I'm using the Glowish by Huda Beauty bronzer. This one is in the shade 04 Deep Tan. And again, so what I'm doing is I'm going back into that powder brush, but I'm using the side that I use for my setting powder. And I picked this one for today because although it looks like it would be like kind of, I guess, reddish pinkish, this bronzer is actually like quite subtle. And it's really kind of like a barely there type of bronzer. So again, I wanted something that was pretty subtle so that nothing is really like taking away from the foundation for today. I think I'm going to take some of this L'Oreal powder. This is the True Match powder in the shade C5. And I think I'm going to put just a little bit of this in my inner corner on my eyelids instead of going in with like a highlighter. I feel like I just want something to just set down. I have a little bit of my the concealer that I put on my lid before I did my eyeshadow. And I feel like it just needs to be set down, but I don't want to do an inner corner highlight for today, just so we can have like a really simple look going on for today. So I'm going to finish with a really simple lip combo. So I'm starting with a brown lip liner from NYX. And then I'm finishing with the Fenty Gloss Bomb Cream in the shade Fenty Glow. Okay, and here is our completed look. So one more time, this is the Charlotte Tilbury foundation side. And this is the Wet n Wild foundation side. So I know that y'all already know that I have on two different foundations, but can you tell that I have on two different foundations, or do you feel like you can tell like just because you know? Let me know in the comments. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna wear these for about six-ish hours, and we're gonna see which one wears better, or do we think that they pretty much wear the same, and do we have a drugstore dupe on our hands. So I will check in with y'all a little bit later on. The time is about 1:30 Monday afternoon. So like I said, I'll be back in a few hours and we will see what we're looking like. Okay guys, I am back. It is 7:22, so that's basically a 6-hour wear test. 7:36 would have been exactly 6 hours. So this is what we are looking like. So again, this over here is the Charlotte Tilbury side, and this is the Wet n Wild side. So let me know what you guys think. Do you notice any difference between the two? Has one worn better than the other, or do they look pretty much the same to you? I do think that the Charlotte Tilbury foundation wore better on me today than it did in my wear test video. In that video, I had it on for either 6 or 6.5 hours, and I was a bit more shiny than I am today. Like, I wasn't like overly shiny, but I think I was a little bit more shiny in that video than today. But in terms of like how they're wearing side by side, I'm really not noticing a difference. I think that I have an equal amount of shine going on both sides of the face, and particularly on my nose and in my forehead, like the usual areas. It's not so much of a natural glow going on. Like you can tell that my skin is getting oily, but I think an equal amount of oiliness on both sides, and I don't think either side looks bad. Like, yes, I'm getting a little shiny, but nothing like crazy at all. Like, I feel like I don't even have to touch this up if I don't want to. So I think that they wore like pretty equally today. What do y'all think? We're gonna do one more test, and I always do this when I test out foundations for the first time, and I also like to do it when I do these side-by-side comparisons. So I'm just gonna blot off the excess oil and then repowder my face, and we'll see what both of the foundations look like after I do that. So I'm just taking a piece of tissue here, and I'm just blotting mainly in the T-zone area. I am going to go in with a different powder brush because I do have bronzer on this brush. So I'm going to go in with a clean powder brush and just reset the makeup. I'm going back into my Sephora powder that I used earlier. And I'm not going to put on as much powder as I did earlier. I just don't think I need it. Okay, and that is what it looks like when we refresh the makeup. So in terms of like how they wore side by side, I'm like slightly, ever so slightly leaning toward this Wet n Wild side, looking a little bit better. And I'm particularly paying attention to the sides of my nose because that's what like really stood out to me when I wore this Charlotte Tilbury foundation the first time. I think that it still does look really nice, but I do kind of feel like the Wet n Wild one, now that I've gone back and repowdered, I just feel like this one just looks a little bit more smooth, I guess, but I feel like to the naked eye you really can't tell a difference. So would I consider this Wet n Wild Tinted Hydrator a drugstore dupe for the Charlotte Tilbury Beautiful Skin Foundation? They're not exact dead-on dupes of one another, but they are extremely similar in my opinion. So the Charlotte Tilbury formula is a little thicker, and like I said earlier, it is just slightly more challenging to blend this out. And when I say challenging, I don't mean that it's hard to blend this out. It's just that compared to the Wet n Wild one, the Wet n Wild one was just a little bit easier to blend out because the formula of this one is just not quite as thick as the Charlotte Tilbury one. And really outside of that, I really can't think of anything else that I would consider like too different between these two. I think that they look pretty much the same. Now I know that my foundations are two different colors on my face. I feel like you can't even really tell that either, but you know, I can tell because it's like my skin. But aside from the two different shades that I have going on, I do feel like they look pretty much the same. I did say earlier that I was leaning toward the Wet n Wild side, and I still like kind of am leaning that way in terms of which one do I like best. But I mean, I think that they both look really, really nice. So let me know what y'all think in the comments. Based on how these performed on me today, would you consider this one to be a drugstore dupe for Charlotte Tilbury? And is there one that you like better than the other? So I hope that you enjoyed this video today. If you did, please let me know by giving me a thumbs up. If you have any ideas for foundation versus foundation videos that you would like for me to do, please let me know in the comments. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel before you head out, and I will see y'all back here for my next one. Until then, take care. Have a good one, y'all. Bye.